Now that we understand the primary hand grip on the gun, we need to talk about the support hand. Okay, if we need to apply the same three principles with the support hand as we did with the primary hand, we need high friction, pressure, and leverage into the gun to mitigate recoil and the deviation of the muzzle during the trigger pull. All right, it's really important the order of operations with the support hand grip on the gun. All right, we start with the fingers, then the palms. Okay, and how we apply this pressure, if you can imagine pulling my fingers into my palm and then simultaneously pushing my palm to my fingers. All right, I'm creating that vise into the frame of the gun. I'm clamping it on either side of the gun. Okay, so we're going to start with the fingers. What we want to do with the support hand, we're going to take the first knuckle of our index finger and we're going to place it right underneath the trigger guard on top of the middle finger of my primary hand. A trick that I learned that has helped immensely with my consistency of grip as well as my control with the gun during recoil is taking my index finger of my support hand and actually placing it against the frame of the gun above the middle finger of my primary hand. So as you can see like that, I'm clamping the gun into place with my index finger. This, what it's going to do is one, give me a consistent spot that my finger can drop into every time I grip the gun, as well as it locks my hand into place, so my hand cannot slide around during recoil because it's locked in on top of my primary middle finger. What this also does is ensures that every time that I squeeze down on my hand, I set my pins, set my fingers down onto my primary hand, that they drop in the same position every time. It's very important that these fingers clamp down in the valleys of my fingers, not on top of my knuckles. Right? They have to be down in the valleys because if I'm up top during recoil, skin on skin is just going to slide around. I'm not going to feel good control of the gun. So I need to make sure that they are set down in the valleys of my fingers, not on top of my knuckles. This is going to give us the best consistent grip and most control of the gun during recoil. So now that we have set the fingers, we now need to push the palms into the frame of the gun. All right, it's important that I get my support hand, thumb, and palm as high on the frame as possible so that I have as much friction and contact against the frame. As you can see, when I'm high on the frame, I have contact all the way from the back of my thumb all the way up through the tip of my thumb. This is going to give me the most coverage over the frame as possible. It's really important that this primary hand thumb is up and out of the way. If my thumb is down as I try to push my palms into the frame, you can see that I cannot get contact with the support hand against the frame because my thumb is in the way. This gap between my hand and the frame is going to cause a lot of movement of the gun during recoil because I'm not getting that contact and friction against the frame. So primary hand thumb out of the way. You can see this gap of my thumb right here, my support hand needs to fill that gap. I want the back of my thumb to fill this portion of my primary hand thumb. So I fill that gap, and now I have contact against the frame completely, as well as contact from my primary hand to my support hand. You can also see that my thumbs are pointed forward. What that's going to do is allow my hand to get a natural cant forward, engaging more leverage in my wrist and a good structure in my wrist to mitigate recoil. One thing that I see frequently is if someone has a low grip on the gun, you can see that my support hand thumb is pointed up instead of forward. What that does is it creates gaps between my palms, as well as I lose coverage and friction against the gun. Right? I need to make sure that my support hand is as high as possible against the frame. That way that I have good contact and a good cant in my wrist. This position here is going to create the best recoil management and control we can get. Also, I see people that slide too far forward and now they have that gap between their hands. All right, that's one more area where energy can try to escape during recoil and we get more movement in the gun. We want to make sure that we close that gap and we have good contact between our palms. So just to recap with the support hand, right, I want to set the fingers first, index against the frame, set my fingers down in the valleys of my fingers of my primary hand so everything is locked into place. Then, after my fingers are set, I'm going to pull with my fingers and drive my palm into the frame, high on the frame, I have good contact between both of my hands, no space between my palms. My thumbs are pointed forward and I'm vicing into the frame. This position right here has good friction, high pressure, and high leverage. Now that we understand what both hands are supposed to be doing, how we get the friction, how we apply pressure, and the good leverage that we can build in our structure, there's an important distinction that we need to understand, and that's the difference between how much pressure each hand is doing. Okay, so first with the primary hand, the primary role of our hand on the gun, our primary hand on the gun, is to, one, pull the trigger, and two, make sure the gun doesn't slide out of our hand. I only need to hold this gun tight enough that the gun doesn't slide, but not too tight where I can't isolate my trigger finger. So I'm tight in my pinky, loose in my middle finger, and trigger finger. Support hand on the other side, this is where we get most of our pressure, high pressure, and good recoil management and control of that muzzle during the trigger pull. This hand can be applying a lot of pressure, vicing into the gun. So when I get set, I'm squeezing and vicing into both sides of that frame to keep it in place. So most of the recoil management is coming from your support hand, not your primary hand on the gun.